President-elect Donald Trump took to his Truth Social page to share that Mexico's leader Claudia Sheinbaum had agreed to stop migration during a conversation between the pair, effectively closing the border between their countries. On his post, Trump asserted, "Just had a wonderful conversation with the new president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo. She has agreed to stop migration through Mexico and into the United States, effectively closing our southern border. We also talked about what can be done to stop the massive drug inflow into the United States and also U.S. consumption of these drugs. It was a very productive conversation." For her part, Mexico's president denied Trump's words in a message on the X network. Sheinbaum said that she explained to the U.S. president-elect the comprehensive strategy that Mexico has followed to address the migration phenomenon and reiterated that her country's position is not to close borders, but to build bridges between governments and between peoples. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel assured on Wednesday that the country is ready to face any administration that occupies the White House. From the municipality of Las Lajas in the province of Cienfuegos, the head of state assured a group of farmers and neighbors of that area that neither Republicans nor Democrats have represented a change for the island, in addition to reiterating that they are ready for the administration that will begin in January, recognizing the wariness about also the extraordinary effort of the Cuban people in the face of sanctions. He also insisted that Havana remains open to any dialogue with Washington, but with equality and respect. Venezuela has positioned itself among the vanguard countries in the struggle against fascism and its diverse expressions. And just this week, a new meeting called International Anti-Fascist for a New World is taking place. Details in the following report.
The revolutionary process promoted in Venezuela has once again become a benchmark in the fight against the various expressions of world fascism and has called on many international political and social organizations to organize and join forces.
Fascism is nothing more than a derivation. It is like an element that imperialism uses and capitalism uses to maintain its domination, to maintain its exploitation of the working men and women. So the anti-fascist struggle is also an anti-capitalist struggle. It is a struggle for the construction of socialism. Which is the only way we know of to be able to extinguish, as Comrade Randa said, definitively both capitalism and its most violent expressions, or those with the greatest error in which it is expressed, which is fascism itself.
One of the most representative fighters against capitalism was the revolutionary fighter Ernesto Che Guevara. And his daughter, the revolutionary Dr. Aleida Guevara, is worthy of inheriting Che's anti-fascist legacy.
¿Qué significa el fascismo?
What fascism means, look at the examples. This is what we have lived. This is what you can live if you allow it. This is what you want, for example, to be left without housing, for example, to be left without culture, for example, to hand over everything you have to another state so that it can come and dominate you and crush you and try to disappear you as a people. That is what you want? Surely not. So what we have to do is to try to be like my father. It is easier to make you follow than not having to force. And that is very important. We have to demonstrate our truths, but in such a way that the young people understand them and join the struggle out of conviction. Not because we are forcing them, but because we have convinced them that a better world is possible.
Within the analysis and reflection of the world geopolitical context, it was agreed that one of the ways in which fascism disguises itself is through governments elected under democratic mechanisms, but which act with authoritarian expressions that favor the interests of those who hold economic and political power.
The government as such has made policies that go against the Salvadoran people, public policies that are not in accordance with what the population is asking for, as in the case of the high cost of living, as in the case of regulations to apparently raise taxes. There are even regulations that had to go back a little because of the popular voice.
Subir impuestos, aparentemente impuestos. Incluso hay normativas que se tuvieron que como retroceder un poco por la voz
When there are
popular.
demonstrations of social organizations, there are many checkpoints, and the population is detained, and they are doing all kinds of actions that do not facilitate conditions for people to demonstrate.
Para que no se manifiesten.
Another of the manifestations of fascism, as an expression of capitalism, is the disregard of the cultural manifestations of the native peoples who struggle for their identity and dignity.
We are fully supporting the worldwide struggle against fascism. We are the representation of the native peoples of Guatemala, and we are here supporting and making a worldwide network so that we are respected as native people.
This concludes the first day held in Caracas to confront international fascism.
The Brazilian Supreme Court of Justice began on Wednesday debating on a regulation of social media in view of the spread of fake news and hate speech. The starting point of the regulation was a police inquiry into an alleged thwarted coup plot in 2022. The case involves former President Jair Bolsonaro. Authorities could determine that criminals used social media to misinform about the reliability of the electoral system to justify serious offenses. In addition, the court will decide whether social media platforms will be sanctioned for illegal publications or not by 2025. Concurrently, the entity has examined cases related to the rules for social media platforms and the responsibility for the contents published by users. The government confirmed that it will make cuts in public spending to generate savings, most of which will come from a reform of the military pension system. The Minister of Finance, Fernando Haddad, said that the measure will allow savings of 70 billion reals, equivalent to nearly $12 billion over the next 2 years. In the same instruction, the ministerial office confirms that the income tax exemption for those who earn up to 5,000 reals or slightly more than $800. According to Minister Haddad, these measures help to fight privileges incompatible with the principle of equality, and part of the objectives is to guarantee that all civil servants are subject to the constitutional principle. In Brazil, the launch of the global plan against hunger and poverty during the G20 summit reopens the debate between South and North on agricultural development models. Let's see more details in the following report.
During the
G20 summit, President Lula da Silva gave concrete expression to Pope Francisco's idea by launching the global plan to combat hunger and poverty, a platform that was endorsed by 82 countries plus the European Union and the African Union.
We cannot talk about any public policy if we do not fight hunger, if we do not fight social inequality.
Pero la salida para eso es que no ficó muy claro.
But the way out for that was not very clear because the fund will be formed with money from the World Bank. Most of the fund will be for loans, and we already know how that works.
Y ya sabemos cómo eso funciona.
Funciona así.
The neoliberal structural adjustment programs imposed by the World Bank in the 1960s encouraged the production of monoculture export crops. In the 1980s and 1990s, together with the International Monetary Fund, they pressured the countries of the Global South to abandon food production and focus on export crops such as coffee, tea, cocoa, and the purchase of basic foodstuffs on the world market. The result was dramatic. Today, a handful of transnational corporations dominate highly financialized agri-food markets. In 2023, some 2,330 million people around the world were moderately or severely food insecure. A recent report by the Fiocruz Health Institute states that 1 in 10 deaths in Brazil in 2019 were the result of the consumption of ultra-processed foods. Among the voices of world leaders at the G20, Latin American peasant movements adhere to two positions: Colombian President Gustavo Petro's and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum's.
It is the peasantry and the small farmer of each country that has the vocation to work the land and fulfill its social function, which is the #1 basis for feeding their own people and the world. We call this agrarian reform.
The statement that freedom is only in the market is a falsehood. What freedom? The freedom to starve to death? That is not freedom, it is oblivion, it is dehumanization.
In the opposite direction to the prescriptions of neoliberal organizations, the landless movement is approaching 20 years of cooperation with Venezuelan communes for the exchange of agroecological production practices.
The landless movement is here today in Venezuela, as it is in Zambia, as it is in Haiti or in Cuba. We are talking about peoples who are seeking, despite all the difficulties, despite all the siege that international organizations are carrying out, their paths, their search to transform the concrete reality of the people.
This week, during a debate in Brasilia, the Brazil-China Center for Research, Development and Promotion of Mechanization Technology for Family Farming launched this week a laboratory and will test Chinese machines and equipment that will operate in landless movement settlements.
China has a wonderful experience on how it fought poverty and social inequality. At the root is the agrarian reform they carried out between 1945 and 1952. When they distributed all the land.
The plan against hunger and poverty proposed to reach 500 million people with income distribution programs by 2030 and to expand school meals to 150 million children. In this context, the debate on land concentration and the role of agroecology is reopening.
The United States President Trump took to his Truth Social page to share that Mexico's leader Claudia Sheinbaum had agreed to stop migration during a conversation between the pair, effectively closing the border between their countries. On